Hi Year 11 and welcome to this summary revision video on our Power and Conflict poetry cluster. The aim of these videos is just to talk through 5 poems at a time. I'm going to try and keep it to 10 minutes as much as I can. I might really regret saying that. And just literally go through what each poem is about and give you some quotations for them. If you need more detail, then there are obviously the 10 videos that I've done already on a selection of the 10 poems, and there are Mr. Bruff's brilliant videos available as well. You've got both the longer talk sessions and the short 5-minute summary ones. So this is literally supposed to be a really quick run through of the poems. I've put them into the clusters that you can see on the slide, and you're going to see this every single time. Obviously all of these poems can be compared to each other, like some more obviously than others. I have roughly grouped them based on some themes, but obviously like there are 3 poems for me that really stand out for nature. The other 2 I've kind of shoehorned in a little bit, so I'm not necessarily going to talk about themes, but I just don't want you to worry too much about how I've clustered them. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to make a start on cluster 1, so keep watching and follow along. So first poem, you might want to quickly reread this poem, maybe you want to pause it and make a mind map of what you remember, or you just want to write down some facts as we go. So Charge the Light Brigade, written by Alfred Lord Tennyson, about the Crimean War, specifically the Battle of Balaclava. This is not a jingoistic poem, it is not celebrating warfare, it is very much celebrating the bravery and heroism of the soldiers, the cavalrymen of the Light Brigade who rode into battle and lost their lives. And in the poem, Tennyson really highlights and motively highlights that these 600 soldiers who rode into the Valley of Death, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, they didn't stand a chance against the quote cannons and then them armed only with their quote sabres. They really didn't stand a chance, and this resulted in the disastrous loss of life that we see, not the 600, but then they rode back, but not the 600. And it was a blunder, someone had blundered that led to this this situation. So there's a subtle criticism of the higher chains of command in battle here. The use of dactylic diameter, so the galloping of the horse's hooves being replicated, half a league, half a league, half a league onward, reflects this powerful opening stanza, creates a sense of movement that we see throughout the rest of the poem. And the stanza structures themselves follow the narrative of the battle. As they ride into the battle, they get into the battle, they're fighting, and then they're coming back, they're retreating, and then the final stanza is a kind of summary of how we should now feel about these men, how we should treat them. So with all of these poems, these quotations are not the best quotations or the right ones or anything like that. It's just 5 that came into my mind when I was creating this. So half a league, half a league, half a league onwards, as we've already said, into the Valley of Death rode the 600. So we've actually got the 2 quotations, 2 and 3 there joined together. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. So I'm just kind of giving you some little further prompts here. And then honour the charge they made, noble 600. What would be a great idea to do with these quotations would be to kind of go through, think about what you would analyse, what would you zoom into, is it particular methods, is it something structural, do they get repeated, but that's very much an additional revision activity you can do, because as I said, this is going to be quick, guys. You think I talk fast normally? This is a whole new level. Okay, poem 2, Bayonet Charge by Ted Hughes, 1957. So this poem starts off using in media res. We get that immediate plunge into the action. Suddenly he awoke and was running, creating this sense of panic and confusion, which replicates the mood of the soldier himself. As this poem is all to do with warfare again, the first stanza is filled with imagery of combat. So for example, we get the suggestion that the soldier is this machine of war, that warfare, battle has turned him into just kind of another piece of machinery, a mechanism. And that can be seen through the simile, lugged a rifle, numb as a smashed arm. That idea that if an arm is smashed, it's not particularly helpful or useful, is it? The second stanza in this 3-stanza poem then has this kind of like freeze. We talk when we're in kind of panic about fight, flight or freeze. And this is where the soldier freezes. He's overwhelmed with what is going around him. He kind of like completely stops and considers why on earth he is here, what has happened to him. He's unable to make sense of the situation, and he's only jolted out of that by nature. The shot/furrows threw up a yellow hair. That's a quotation, and there's huge symbolism between the hair being reflective of the soldier, this sense of innocence and vulnerability which war is destroying. and will ultimately destroy them. And in the third stanza, that makes him realise that he just has to keep going, and has to keep moving. I always interpret it that he's running through no man's land, maybe like towards kind of enemy fire, but that is an interpretation rather than what's said explicitly in the poem. And there's this real sense of kind of defeat and futility, I think it's pointlessness at the end of this poem, where he only feels fear and panic. There's none of these lofty ideas, king, honour, human dignity that he had before. He just needs to keep going and try to survive. So 5 quotations for bayonet charge. Most of these I have already said, but for example, we've got suddenly he awoke and was running, that in media res, lugged a rifle numb as a smashed arm, the simile being used there, cold clockwork of the stars and the nations. So this is in the second stanza when he freezes, and I love that imagery of time, the cold clockwork, which sounds really harsh as well, as if he is frozen in time, but considering how much time he has left. He's a tiny, again, kind of like cog in a big machine there. Shot/furrows threw up a yellow hair. So that lovely sibilance on shot slashed, as if the bullets are whizzing across. And then that horrible, quite like graphic image of it like throwing up. This poor animal is thrown into the conflict. Yellow making it very, very visible. And then king, honour, human dignity, etc. Like these are the qualities, these are the abstract nouns and ideals that he's told to go for war for. And they just mean nothing to him anymore, because the reality of warfare is that it is terrifying and awful. Okay, our third poem, War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy. So in this poem, a little bit different to the 2 we've looked at. This isn't about, it is a first-hand experience for the kind of character in the poem, the speaker, but it's like he's been there experiencing it, but not personally involved in the fighting. So it's a different sort of experience, and we can very much link this to the ideas of PTSD. So this war photographer has returned home to the UK after seeing and documenting all these atrocities of war in kind of like global places. And the dark room that he's in with the red light, which is quite literally developing his photographs of all of these agonies, these horrors, but it also symbolises his need for isolation. He needs to be alone to process what he's been through. But again, on a symbolic level, we could talk about how he's almost trapped in this personal hell and horror of what he has seen. That this is in some ways representing his mind and how incredibly damaged he is. The biblical allusion, there's quite a few biblical allusions, but the phrase all flesh is grass is normally used talking about like funerals and the transience of human life. So it really emphasises the message of this poem about the kind of suffering and death that he has seen. And there's a massive juxtaposition between the safety of rural England that he gets to return home to, that we get to live in, which is safe and removed from the 100 agonies suffered by those abroad in global conflicts. And in this poem, which I think is so relevant for what's going on in our world at the moment, Duffy is criticising the indifference and desensitisation that we have, both kind of in the media, that editor who picks out 5 or 6 photos, the best 5 or 6 from the hundreds that he's taken, but also the way that that desensitises us as a society towards global conflicts that are happening. So as with our other poems, there's a pattern here. I've probably mentioned a few of these quotations already. So in his dark room, he is finally alone. I like to start off with the first line of each poem because I think they're really helpful. That sense that he kind of longs for this isolation to try and process everything that he's been through. And one way that he does that is with the spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. The spools of suffering are the photographs that are being developed on his camera or from his camera. And I always think that juxtaposition with ordered rows creates a sense of how he's trying to make sense out of chaos. The biblical allusion that we've already talked about, all flesh is grass, suggesting the impermanency, the lack of permanence that human life has. 100 agonies in black and white, from which his editor will pick out 5 or 6. Juxtaposition of the numbers there. The idea of 100 agonies really making that kind of suffering graphic, and the reader's eyeballs prick with tears between the bath and pre-lunch beers. So particularly that use of the verb prick, which connotes a very kind of small, sharp but momentary pain, a quick pain, fleeting pain, that shows how soon the suffering on this global scale are forgotten by the people who witness them. Okay, our next poem is Remains by Simon Armitage. So it's always a firm favourite with our Year 11s normally because it's fairly easy to remember. So the title itself is a metaphor referring to both the literal bodily remains of the looter who is shot by the soldier or soldiers, but also the trauma, the PTSD that clearly remains with the speaker, the soldier, from this experience. The opening phrase, on another occasion we get sent out, implies that acts of violence are common in war. On another occasion, this has happened before. It's a little bit in media res, like we're joining him in the middle of this kind of conversation. There's a tone of uncertainty created in the poem through the repetition of probably armed, possibly not, that sense of guilt that's built up. He wants to believe, probably, that the looter was armed and therefore it was right to shoot him, but there is just that little niggle in his mind, that possibility that he was not and he shot an innocent, unarmed man. Casual language that's used to describe the aftermath of the looter's shooting, tosses his guts back into his body, then he's carted off in the back of a lorry, and it builds a sense of distance, again, that desensitisation, like we talked about in War Photographer, between the soldier and the looter, the violent acts that are being committed. And the final image of the bloody hands are an allusion to Macbeth. You thought you were away from it, escaped from it, but you're not. They're an allusion to Macbeth. We know that the blood in Macbeth represents the guilt. And by saying the final line of the poem, his bloody life in my bloody hands, it helps to convey the speaker's enduring feelings of guilt. Again, key quotations, on another occasion, probably on, possibly not. I see every round as it rips through his life. I would really focus on that violent verb, rips, and what they're doing to the looter. Tosses his guts back into his body, as we said, and his bloody life in my bloody hands. Okay, our final poem in this little cluster. So we're going for Poppies by Jane Weir. This poem offers an alternative voice to the ones that we've heard in the other four poems that we mentioned. This is a female voice, which is very rare in war poetry, but also it's the voice of a loved one who's been left behind. It's not a first-hand experience of warfare as all the others have been, most of them being actual soldiers fighting, but obviously in the case of War Photographer, it being a photographer who's on the front line. This is the mother who's been left behind as her son goes to war. So we get this maternal perspective, the struggles that she feels as she lets her child kind of potentially go towards his death. And there's a twin memory, both him in his kind of military uniform now as an adult, but also him as an innocent schoolboy. And the juxtaposition between the two shows the mother's sense of like fear and worry for his safety. She has to accept that her son is leaving and focus on the love and care that she has for him. There's nothing else she can do, but there's a real ambiguity in the ending of our poem. The lack of a time frame means that we're not quite certain. Is the soldier dead? Is he going to come back? Is the mother going to be able to cope with the kind of grief and worry that's eating away at her? What is going to happen in the soldier's future? And that's what war does to individuals, isn't it? It causes these schisms, these splits in families. Quotations for Poppies, so that the very opening of the poem is 3 days before Armistice Sunday, and poppies had already been placed on individual war graves. So that idea that this is the only time situation that we get in the poem, it is after World War I, but we don't know any more than that. The symbol of the poppy obviously being super important. There's lots of sensory maternal imagery in this poem. I wanted to graze my nose across the tip of your nose. There's lots of kind of things to do with like touch and kind of showing little gestures of like love language, as we kind of talk about now. For the soldier leaving, when the door is thrown open, the world is overflowing like a treasure chest. There's this real sense of adventure and excitement that's created through that simile, whereas his mother sees it as him being intoxicated, another one-word quotation, which has very different connotations. We get a lot of bird imagery, so there's the metaphor of release a songbird from its cage. If we think about what a songbird represents, they're fragile, vulnerable, they can't survive in the wild. If that represents the son, then it really tells us something about the kind of his maybe future, doesn't it? And what we're kind of worried about. And then the final line, hoping to hear your playground voice catching on the wind. His mother is waiting. There's a sense of yearning as she hopes to see her son return to her. So thank you very much for going through this, guys, and listening to this cluster. I'm really sorry, I told you I'd try and keep it to 10 minutes and that was an absolute lie, but it is going to be under 15. Hopefully that's just given you a really quick run through of 5 of our poems that largely broadly cluster together under the idea about war, reality of conflict, effects of conflict, and fingers crossed that's a good springboard either as a summary, last minute cramming, or to bring you into some other revision. So as always, if this has been helpful, please do like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you watch cluster 2 and cluster 3. Thanks all.